Reflections in Time is made possible in part by support from the UNO Alumni Association, fostering a legacy of alumni giving since 1913.
The interview series Reflections in Time was begun by the late Professor Paul Borghi more than 15 years ago. This new series continues Paul's work and is dedicated to his memory. This is how Paul began many of the 73 interviews that he recorded. It's often exciting to look at the future of UNO, what it might be like in times to come. Sometimes, though, it's important to stop. Stop and take a look at the past of the university, the people and the happenings that helped make the excitement of future history possible. With this in mind, join me for Reflections in Time. My name is Jack Newton. I'm retired now, but I'm still active as a professor emeritus. I've been on the faculty of UN Omaha since 1960. I've served for 20 years as Dean of the College of Arts and Sciences, and I worked closely with Paul Borghi in the development of his original interview series. I can think of no more fitting tribute to Paul than to continue this work. So this afternoon we're in the studios of KYNE at University of Nebraska at Omaha, and it's the last day in March in the year 2000, and I have here as my guest Dr. Larry Trussell, a longtime Dean of the College of Business Administration and now a currently Professor of Accounting, I guess. Isn't that right, Larry?
That's right.
So you've been here a long time, since 1974. And I think I've known you most of that time. In fact, we began our acquaintance as you were my teacher, weren't you?
I remember that now, teaching you accounting one semester. Yeah. And I admire you for always continuing your education like that.
Well, it was fun. I'm not sure how many people would say an accounting course was fun, but I thought it was. I was Dean of the College of Arts and Sciences, and I thought with all the accountants I needed to talk to, I'd better learn to talk their language. And it was very helpful. And I have to say, you were a very good teacher. I enjoyed it.
Thank you.
So you started here in 1974. You know, as I say, we've known each other for a long time, but I don't think I've ever asked you about your roots, where you came from, how you got into this business. Could you tell us a little about that?
I'd be happy to. I'm actually a native Nebraskan. I was born and raised in a small town by the name of Stella in the very southeast corner of the state. And as a teenager, my father had a job transfer to Kansas, and so that's where I graduated from high school and went to college for my undergraduate and master's degree, and then on to the University of Arkansas for my PhD.
And what year did you get your bachelor's degree?
I think it was 65 for my bachelor's and 66 for my master's, and then went to Arkansas immediately thereafter to be with our President Bill Clinton and getting those student deferments at that time, as you may recall. But I was in residence only 2 years there, 66 to 68, and left what we referred to then as ABD, and worked on my dissertation after I started teaching.
ABD is all but dissertation.
All but dissertation.
Everything completed for the doctoral degree except the dissertation.
Yes. And then it took me 3 years to finish that, so I didn't actually complete my degree until 72, I guess, it's dated.
What were you doing in the meantime?
I took a full-time faculty position at Eastern Michigan University in Ypsilanti, Michigan, which is a suburb of Detroit, and that was my first full-time teaching position. I was all of 26 years old or so at the time, and thrust into a university in a city that had just come off the worst race riots in the country at that time, and so it it was an interesting environment to begin a career in.
And then you came to UNO?
No,
directly from that, or?
in 1971, actually the same time I finished my PhD, I immediately became a department chair of accounting at Appalachian State University in Boone, North Carolina. And
how did you happen to move there from Ypsilanti?
Just responded to an ad of an opening, and it turned out that my longtime friend and mentor Bill Muse, who was also from the University of Arkansas, had just become dean there, and so he kind of recognized an Arkansas alum and invited me to be his department chair in accounting. And so we worked together there actually only for 2 years, because in '73 Bill Muse came here as dean of the business college, and I stayed in North Carolina 1 more year before joining him here as his associate dean.
Now, how large an institution was Appalachian State when you were there?
It was, I don't know, in the 5,000 or 6,000 student range. It's a regional state university, not unlike Kearney State University in Nebraska, and but in North Carolina, the university system had like 16 or 17 campuses. It was a very large system, and so it was. It's not an institution unlike UNO in the sense of one campus of a multi-campus system.
When you were there, you were department chair. Were there many people in the accounting department then? Or?
Well, I think we started off with 5 or 6, but by the time I left, we were up to 10 or 12. So it was a fast growing situation. It was a brand new college of business that had evolved from a business education department at that time. And so it was a brand new situation, which made it interesting.
So Bill Muse moved there, and then a year later called on you to follow him. Is that right?
When he came here, I think one of his the first things he did was to create an associate dean position to share the responsibility of the dean's office, and invited me to apply for it. And as it turned out, it was an opportunity to come home for both my wife and I, and we didn't have that particularly in mind when we did it, but it turned out to be a good situation. Excuse me.
Go ahead.
So I served here for 5 years as associate dean, and then Bill Muse moved on to Texas A&M, and I got the opportunity to be dean.
Great. I remember that very well. Can you tell me a little bit about when you first came here, what your first impressions of the campus were? What was it like back in 1974?
Well, I remember, the first thing I remember is how the faculty of the College of Business were spread all over campus. We didn't really have a home at that time. We had a few of us were in what's now Arts and Sciences Hall. A few of the faculty were in some Quonset huts that I think are somewhere near where the Hyper building is now. I think there were some Quonset huts over on that side of campus somewhere that we were utilizing as offices. And a few of them, a few faculty were actually housed in what are practice rehearsal rooms, lesson rooms in Fine Arts building.
In the the older section, Fine Arts, the Performing Arts Center.
And so we were all over the place, and as associate dean, I had to really, part of my job was to really try to keep faculty together, or bring a faculty together that was so spread out. Right. And so I walked across campus a lot just to visit with people and so forth. So that was the first thought I had. But
now shortly thereafter, you got a new building, right?
Yes, I came in July, 1st, 74, and on January 1st, or the start of the winter semester, we moved into what was then the brand new College of Business building. And so 6 months later, and so one of my first jobs was to really orchestrate that move and to try to assign faculty offices without the whole college falling apart. A very sensitive thing.
Everybody wanted a window, I bet.
Everybody wanted a window, and we actually had, this may seem strange today, but we had one faculty member who organized a campaign to have one suite of offices designated non-smoking, and that was Will Srokes.
Yes.
And he was very aggressive in this posture, which we wouldn't even think anything of today, but it resulted in us having to devise a system of office selection which paid no attention to departments. It was entirely a random office assignment within that building, but those who wanted to, from the very start, to be part of a non-smoking suite were able to do so. And of course, now the whole campus is non-smoking.
Right, there's not a building where you can light up a cigarette. You mentioned something. You talked about not paying attention to departmental structures, but if I recall correctly, didn't one of the early things that Dean Muse did was to do away with some of the department structure?
Yes, he believed, and I believe also, that one of the fundamental differences of a college of business is, as opposed to some other colleges, is the fundamental identity is with the college, and secondary identity with a department. We always say a college of business is a college that chooses to organize itself into departments for administrative purposes, as opposed to other colleges that are a group of departments that choose to organize themselves into a college. And that's a subtle but significant difference. And so we always tried to create an environment where the primary identity of a faculty member is with the college, and secondarily to one or more areas. And so, yes, Bill Muse had what he called program areas. I think we had 8 or 9 small clusters of faculty, which we refer to as programs, at that time in the college. And it's gone through a lot of evolution since then, but today we have basically traditional departments. But at that time, the idea was to try to be integrative and interdisciplinary, and it's still a good model for business colleges, I think.
Now, that happened before you arrived on the scene, or?
That happened in Bill Muse's first year.
Yeah.
He chose to organize the college in that way. And
how did the faculty take to that?
I think most of them were agreeable to it. You can never make a statement in a university. You can never make a generalization that applies to everybody. There's always going to be exceptions to it. But I think I still think that most faculty see themselves as part of the broader college, if not first, at least equal to being part of a department.
I only asked because I was thinking that there are people there who have been there for years and been associated with departments, and I thought it might have been a bit of a change for them.
Historically, and probably still today, the strongest department orientation is in economics in the College of Business.
Of course, that economics department at that time had just switched over from the College of Arts and Sciences.
That's right. Yeah, I don't know exactly when that happened. It had happened.
Early 70s.
Yeah, I knew it was recent because most of the faculty were still part of that move.
And for many years, in fact, it may still be. I don't know. You could still earn an economics degree, or have an economics major in the College of Arts and
Still
Sciences.
can. Yeah. Yeah.
So So you arrived here on the campus, and you were moving everybody into the new building. And if I remember, everybody, that was judged by people on other parts of the campus as being a pretty plush building.
Yeah.
You had all new furniture and nice windows.
Actually, it was the College of Business, even though now it carries the name College of Business, the College of Business has never occupied the whole building. Right. Initially, I think the English department was in there, and philosophy has been in there, and today we have some other departments in there. So, but yes, I think there was you know, some feelings like that, and there was something went on back then that occurred just prior to the year prior to that, to my coming, that I have been told was maybe some changes in who got that building and so forth, but that were made by the chancellor at that time, and it was so there was probably a little stress on campus about that building.
Probably not as much as there was when Kaiser Hall went up, because that's when they first had to tear down all the trees that were in front of the what's now Arts and Sciences Hall, and there were people who threatened to chain themselves to the trees, even though they were all blighted with Dutch elm disease, and you know, you don't see any elm trees around anymore.
No.
But they were very beautiful, and I can understand why people were concerned about them. But you missed that.
Yep. Yep.
Tell me something about, you know, you and I know what pretty well what deans do and what associate deans do, and but many of our listeners aren't part of the university community, and they don't have that good an idea of what goes on in a college. So, what was your work like as an associate dean? I remember you did teach classes. We've already mentioned that. I had you as an instructor for a semester. That's unusual, isn't it? Most associate deans don't teach classes.
I think now they don't. Then I think it was pretty well expected that you'd teach something. I only taught one class each semester, but at least you kept involved in the classroom, and my philosophy about a dean and an associate dean, and I think Bill Muse's philosophy was an associate dean is really more of a partner with the dean and the administration of the college, and so the dean and associate dean kind of analyze each other's strengths and weaknesses, and try to divide up what needs to be done based on those strengths and weaknesses, and so I think in every college, in every situation, exactly how the administration is divided up between the dean and associate dean will be a function of their personalities and their strengths and their weaknesses and so forth. For us, I was very lucky that Bill Muse really involved me in everything, and that he helped mentor me a lot by involving me even in personnel decisions and external activities, but primarily my responsibility was internal, and really to work with the department chairs, program chairs at that time, faculty committees and others to try to make things run as smoothly as possible within the college. And I viewed the job as basically finding a way of to get faculty and so forth the little things they needed to do their job better, and so a lot of the things you're involved in sound kind of trivial and small, if you will, but they're important to a faculty member if he's trying to accomplish something. Sure. To have that little bit extra, and so that was a lot of it. In the College of Business, we have a college-wide graduate program, the MBA program, And so that's a little different situation than a lot of other colleges where graduate programs are departmentally based. For a college-wide program, we ran that or administered that program out of the dean's office, and so the associate dean was responsible for the administration of that program as well. So administering college-wide graduate programs and research programs, as well as trying to provide the instructional and research support to individual faculty, is a big responsibility of the associate dean.
Well, all of that must have stood you in good stead, because in a few years later, when Dean Muse left, you moved into his job.
Yeah, actually, another thing that happened while he was dean, those 5 years, and I was associate dean, is he took a year off and went to Washington on some kind of an internship, and I got to serve as interim dean, acting dean, which I think helped introduce the senior administration to whatever abilities I had. And so when the opportunity did come along, there was a national search, but I was fortunate to emerge from that and have the opportunity to serve as dean for 12 years.
I was going to ask you whether you had some competition for the job or whether...
Yeah, and I forget exactly what happened, but we had a new vice chancellor come to campus, Otto Bauer, and Otto arrived, I think, on July 1 and to begin his job. I forget whether it was a few days one way or the other. But the second day he was on the job is when he called me in to offer me the dean's job. And so all of the preparation had been done prior to that.
So you had a new vice chancellor break in at the same time.
Yes, same time.
The previous vice chancellor had been Herb Garfinkel, right? Dr.
I
Garfinkel,
believe so.
Distinguished political scientist.
Yeah. And
did you have much interaction with him as associate dean? Or?
Well, some, and then he was, the year I served as acting dean, he was he was the provost, and I think carried the title of provost back then too. And I've always given Herb Garfinkel a lot of credit, maybe more than he deserves, for basically starting to change the nature of this institution, you know, towards something a little different than what it had been historically. And I think we were all part of that then.
Yes, I worked very closely with him and shared your high regard for him. I think that he did he really did change things.
Yeah. I felt we were during those years were really becoming more of a university in something other than name only. And I know that the year before Bill Muse came in 1972, there were 2 faculty members who were awarded tenure who had not completed their degree and had no record of scholarly activity. And that changed very quickly in the mid-70s. Yeah, even if it was 2 years later, it wouldn't have happened.
Right.
And so Herb Garfinkel started some very significant changes, I think.
Well, while we're talking about changes, what other sorts of changes have you seen? Have you noticed, for example, changes in the student body? Yeah,
I think the most significant changes in the student body have occurred more recently with the new admission requirements, but clearly in the last few years there's been some evidence of increased abilities of our students and so forth. During those earlier years, we, on a couple different occasions, increased our admission requirements at the graduate level, made those a little more rigorous, and saw some significant improvement in the preparation of graduate students. So the MBA program when I came in '74 was still relatively new. I think it started in about '68, and so it was in need of some continual improvement. And I think it has the quality of MBA students has improved significantly over the years.
So that's another thing that's changed. Did the curriculum change much?
If one compared the catalogs from the early 70s to today, I think their answer to that would be no. You know, it looks awful much the same. You know, you see the accounting 1, accounting 2, and econ 1 and 2, and so forth, and finance and management. But behind the surface, there has been a lot of changes, I think, in the curriculum. Certainly, technology has permeated the whole curriculum, and all of the courses have become much more conceptual in nature and much more liberal in nature in terms of requiring students to think and to analyze as opposed to memorize. So there's been a very significant evolution of the curriculum, I think. That's not apparent on the surface, but it is when one digs into it a little bit and finds out what's really going on.
I remember back in the 70s, one of the things that seemed very important for the College of Business was accreditation by your national, was it AACSB?
Yeah.
What's that acronym stand for? I can never remember.
Yeah, it's American Assembly of Collegiate Schools of Business. Was the national accrediting body for business schools.
Were you heavily involved in that?
Oh, yeah. First of all, the college gained initial accreditation, I believe, in '65. Then Dean Lucas gained accreditation for the college, and it was kind of a club. You were actually invited to join, or by a colleague dean, and at that time the dean at Lincoln, the longtime dean at UNL, invited Dean Lucas to join the club and to bring business school along. Shortly thereafter, they started developing much more rigorous standards, and so our initial accreditation was just of the undergraduate program, and we had to get accreditation of the graduate program or lose the undergraduate accreditation. And so we started working on that in I think the first accreditation review that I was part of was in '76 or '77. We weren't successful, and so we had several cycles of accreditation until we were ultimately successful in gaining graduate level accreditation. And then while I was dean, we had 2 6-year reviews of accreditation, both of which were successful. And now we're coming up again next year for another review. So it's been a significant accomplishment for the college, because at the time that we were accredited, I think there weren't 100 schools in the country accredited, and out of some 1,200 business programs. So he gave you a certain a national mark of excellence, if you will.
If I remember correctly, under your leadership as dean, the college won a number of awards in different areas. We were very fortunate and are today to have some excellent faculty in the college, and so the dean, when it comes time to win awards, oftentimes the dean's just along for the ride, I think, and the awards are won by faculty. But we went through a period of time in the 70s and 80s when we had a group of faculty that were particularly keen on instructional innovations, and some of which involved technology, some of which involved case studies of real businesses, having students go out and work with real businesses and on case studies. And
and one of which involved a joint program with the College of Fine Arts called Arts and the Executives, where we created a cross-listed course with the College of Fine Arts, basically designed to expose our MBA students to the fine arts, with the idea that in the future, as business leaders, they were going to be asked to serve on boards and provide business type assistance to fine arts organizations. And so these were the kinds of programs that won national awards from AACSB, and really propelled the college to some level of national visibility and recognition. So that was a very good period of time for the college. The major faculty member, I'd say, involved in those initiatives is still with us today, David Ambrose, who has been one of the leaders in our college for all the time I've been here. He came here, he joined the faculty in like 73 or 72, just before I did. And so we've been colleagues for all of these years.
You know, one thing I neglected to ask you, I really should have. We went fairly quickly through your beginnings and roots and so on, but I never asked you how you got interested in this in your major field to begin with. Was it accounting right from the start? How did you get interested in accounting?
Well, it's very simple and straightforward. I have 4 brothers and sisters. The oldest, I have a brother that's 10 years older than I am. And as the oldest child, when he graduated from high school in 1951, I graduated in 61. You know, our family was certainly not wealthy. He came to Omaha from Stella, went to a business college here of some sort, commercial college at that time, to study accounting, and became a CPA. You didn't need a college degree in those days to be a CPA. You just needed to prepare yourself to take the test. And he started his career in accounting, and I always looked up to my brother and said I want to be an accountant. And so when I first went to Fort Hays State, I studied accounting. I later switched to economics, got my degrees in economics, but always with a parallel study in accounting. At that time, the curriculum was generally not as structured as it is today. You were able to kind of put together multiple tracks. And so I just studied accounting and economics all the way through, and not much of anything else. But I didn't start with the idea of getting into education, but at Fort Hays State, I had to work my way through college, and the plum job on campus was in the university accounting office, and they hired 2 or 3 accounting majors all the time to work basically processing accounts payable and accounts receivable, and just bookkeeping work, really. And I was fortunate enough to get one of those jobs when I was about a sophomore, junior, and worked there 3 years. And what that did was it put me in daily contact with professors. Daily, I was daily involved with professors, and I kind of had an orientation to the lifestyle and and the expectations of professors, and that really is what led to my career decision about being involved in the university, and went on to graduate school because of that.
Well, it's interesting to hear stories like that. Often people who will be watching this tape, for example, might be students themselves who wonder how people get interested in their chosen career field.
I've often talked to my colleagues about that because I think how infrequently many of us talk to our students about our own careers, sell our own career, sell the idea of being involved with a university or university professor. And I think in other countries and in the old days, if you will, you chose out, you selected your best students and tried to convince them to follow your footsteps, or try to convince them to pursue the career you pursued. And I think we've gotten away from that a lot in universities.
Yeah. Now, you mentioned the MBA. One of the programs that I've always thought was rather interesting was that executive MBA program. Could you tell us what that is and what your involvement with that has been?
Yeah. I was associate dean when we started that program initially, so it was back in I think around 75 or 76. And it was a joint program between UNO and UNL business schools. And at that time it was kind of held up as a great example of inter-campus cooperation, and because the two colleges of businesses got together to start that program, and with the idea of it's a 2-year program. A cohort of students starts together and takes all their classes together for 2 years and graduates together. And the idea was that we would start a class in Omaha on even number years and Lincoln on odd number years. And it went on that way for about 4 or 5 years. We marketed it with the idea that if you come to this program and pay a premium price for it, you'd get the best professors of the whole system. And as it evolved, it just wasn't a viable program in Lincoln. There's not a big enough population to support it.
Yeah, tell us, for the benefit of those who don't know the program, this was open to what kind of students?
Executive MBA program typically would be open to people with a little more business experience who have been nominated or selected by their employers as having executive level potential.
So these are people with jobs who...
and so they'd be basically moving into executive level position, moving out of a functional area maybe to senior managers or identified as potential vice presidents and so forth. And today we find that our executive MBA students may average 13 years of experience, where our regular MBA students average 5 years of experience. So they take substantially more business experience and kind of ready to move up. Would be students who would come to the executive MBA program, and they'd meet, the classes would typically meet, initially it was 2 nights a week, Tuesday and Thursday. Now it's more on the weekend program, Friday and Saturday. But in the initial years, it was 2 nights a week. They would come and have classes. So as the program continued, after about 6 years, UNL dropped out because it just wasn't a viable program in Lincoln, and they essentially turned it over to us to run exclusively in Omaha, and we start a class now every fall, and have probably accumulated over 100 alumni of this program. Several presidents now of companies and vice presidents. Some people that have been very successful are alumni of it, and so it's it's been a shall we say profitable program for the college financially, because we charge a premium price. And it gives the college a little bit of money, not a whole lot, but a little bit of money to do some other things with.
And have you had continuing involvement with that over the years, or are you out of that now?
Well, I'm involved in it now as a professor.
Yes.
Because I teach the accounting classes in that program now, and have since I moved out of the dean's office now 7, 8 years ago. My teaching assignment is almost exclusively in the executive MBA program and the regular MBA program. And so I've had a lot of involvement with those students. And it's very, very enjoyable teaching assignment for me. Very challenging because they are challenging students. They challenge the professors. So if you're not comfortable being challenged, they don't just accept everything you say as gospel. They want you to prove it to them. So.
Well, let's talk a little more about what you've been doing since you left the office of dean. I know you're involved in international things.
Yeah.
What else are you? Well, let's talk about that and talk about anything else you may be doing.
Yeah, in 1990, as dean of the Business College, I and my colleagues, in kind of a strategic planning mode, really concluded that the College of Business wasn't doing nearly enough internationally, that the trend in business is international, and our college was really not very doing anything very substantial in an international mode. And so we actually created a position called, to provide leadership in international programs in business. We called it a coordinator of international initiatives, kind of a college-wide position to just try to stimulate international initiatives. And so then I resigned as dean in 1991 and named myself to that position. So what I did was I created a job for myself before I left the dean's job. So people kind of liked that sequence of things. But in 1990, when we decided that we needed to really try to move the college to into a new paradigm with respect to international initiatives, I began working with Dean Goodyear of International Studies, and I think he and I and you went to Europe for a trip to explore some of our sister universities there and explore some opportunities, and that was kind of our initial work. And the next year, when the countries of Central Europe threw off communism and embraced private enterprise, our government decided to invest some money in those countries and invited universities to partner with universities in that part of the country to help them revise their curriculum and train their faculty to conduct programs to help the transition to private enterprise. And we really did a strategic analysis. As you may recall, we went to Prague, to our sister university there, Charles University, a fine university. We analyzed that situation and found out that all kinds of universities were going to try to work in Czechoslovakia and Prague. That's a pretty nice place. But as we analyzed it, so we didn't see ourselves having much of a chance to be successful there. But we talked to our sister university in Romania, Alexander Cuza University, and wasn't very many American universities interested in going to Romania. So we liked the competition. So anyway, Tom Goodyear and I wrote the grant proposal, the first grant proposal, and we got funded for a 3-year program to work with our sister university in Romania. And we were one of 11 U.S. universities funded in that first round. And I think there were like 35 or 6 proposals, and so there was, if you would say, there was a 33% acceptance rate or something like that. So it was still competitive, but it wasn't nearly as competitive in Romania as it was in Czechoslovakia and so forth. And so that got us started, and I resigned as dean to run the international programs, and we subsequently got over 12 grants funded to work in Romania, and we expanded it into Moldova and started basically small business centers like we have here, and the program continues today. fact, I just got back from Romania.
I was going to say, you just came back from there, and I'm especially grateful that you'd come in this afternoon, because I know that you only came back, was it, the day before yesterday?
Yes, 2 days ago.
And after a very, very long airplane ride.
We have some very good friends in Romania, and they're very successful. In fact, our initial partner there, back in 1990 when we wanted to write the grant, we tracked down a faculty member from there in accounting who was doing a Fulbright at the University of Alabama. And we invested a couple $100s in an airplane ticket and flew him to Omaha for a week. And we sat down that week and wrote the grant proposal. And so I was a director on this end, he was a director on that end. And subsequently, he served 8 years as a vice rector there, as vice chancellor. And as we expanded the program, like in the second or third year, we brought in a Professor Oprah, who was another professor of accounting, and he worked with us, and just last January was elected rector or chancellor of their university.
Nice.
And so our alumnus, or the people who have worked with us in this program, have emerged as leaders over there in their program. And he invited me he got some money from the World Bank to do an MBA program. And he invited me to come and deliver a course on international accounting to his MBA students. And so this is my 8th trip to Romania. All of the others have been as a program administrator. You know, you go in and you hit the place for 3 or 4 or 5 days and take care of administrative problems, and you're out of there. This time I was there for 16 days and lectured 3 hours a day to their MBA students.
In English or
in English, because it's a MBA with an international emphasis, international business emphasis, an international MBA. And they require English proficiency.
I asked you that because I'm going to remind you now. I remember back the first time you went there, you had a bet with Tom Gutierrez.
That's right.
That you would be able to speak Romanian within, what was it, a year or two or something like that.
Yeah.
Who won?
Tom won. I still owe him that dinner. But no,
I'll remind him of that.
He reminds me often enough. But no, I'd never. One of the things, you studied accounting. And on a number of occasions over the years, I've taken various foreign language courses here, and generally it's I think I have just basically provided a lot of laughs for the teacher is all it ever came down to. I'm never very proficient in what I was able to learn, but it doesn't, it does help really to study German or whatever you're going to go. Not that you can become proficient, but that you can get yourself out of trouble a little bit anyway if you get in trouble. So,
let's shift gears for just a moment to a little different topic, because I know that one of your interests here at the university has been in UNO athletics. Could you tell us something about what sorts of things you've done in that area?
Yeah, I think we all have responsibilities beyond our immediate area, and I think every administrator, every dean is part of the broader university team, and I always enjoyed athletics and was involved to some extent, and in 1979, then Vice Chancellor for Student Affairs, what was his name, went to Oklahoma State.
Oh, yes, Ron Beer.
Ron Beer had been serving as institutional representative to the NC2A, and he was ready to move on or something, and so that position came open, and I approached Don Leahy and the Chancellor with an interest in it, and at that time, Chancellor Weber liked to have somebody from his administrative team be the representative to the NC2A, as opposed to a, quote, faculty representative, which is common at some institutions. But you really are the representative, you really are representing the Chancellor And so the chancellor felt most comfortable with administrative person and gave me that opportunity. And I served for 10 years until 1989 when I basically suggested that was long enough. Although some people do it, it's a life, it's a career. It's a career job. They never get out of it. But basically what that involved was going to 2 conference meetings a year for 2 days each, and the NC2A meeting in January for 3 or 4 days. And it was, and generally supporting athletics. I was involved in recruiting, interviewing students, handling appeal kinds of cases and so forth. There was a lot of things you were involved with. But it was a very interesting time to be involved in the NC2A, because that's when they passed all of the what were very controversial measures to increase eligibility requirements, and they got into using standardized tests, which have been challenged in terms of their disproportionate impact on minorities and so forth. So it was a very interesting time to be involved.
Are there any special incidents or anything that you recall back in those days that might be interesting to our listeners?
No, it was. It was just interesting people to be involved in. Really good people.
Was that before Title IX or?
Title IX. The first meeting I went to...
When women got involved in the athletic program.
The first meeting I went to in 1979 for our conference, North Central Conference. Of course, UNO was a new member. It had only been a member for 1 or 2 years. And in the first meeting I went to, Connie Clausen went along, because we were talking about starting a women's conference. And so I was involved in helping start the North Central Conference programs for women. And so yes, Title IX had been passed, but it was in the process of being implemented at schools.
So that was one of the things that, as you mentioned, the times were very interesting,
so the women were starting to be involved in our conference and so forth. So yes, very interesting times.
Well, you've had quite a varied career here, done lots of different things at the university, and made important contributions to.
Well, it's been I think it's been for me anyway, it's been a fascinating time to be involved at UNO, because I think the institution has changed since the early '70s, and I think I believe the quality is a lot different today than it was back then. Certainly the graduates are well received by our business community, and I think there's been a certain national recognition and improvement as well by peers.
In the few minutes that we have left here, and we have maybe 4 or 5 minutes, could I ask you to reminisce a little bit about people? We've talked a little bit about, well, we've mentioned Bill Muse a number of times. We've mentioned Herb Garfinkel and Otto Bauer. You were involved with, mostly, I guess, with Chancellor Weber as the chancellor of the institution.
Well, as you well know, we had a team, Jack, that was together for a long time. Right. And a lot of people have asked me about serving as a dean, and certainly there's two groups of people you have to deal with very closely. One is your faculty and department chairs and people within your college, but the other is your colleagues, your administrative colleagues, and it's absolutely no fun to be an administrator if you can't get along well and be good friends, really, with your administrative colleagues, because, as you know, you're thrust together time and time again in professional and social situations, and so I've visited an awful lot of universities over the years in various roles of accreditation for North Central and for AACSB. And I don't think I've ever seen a group that was as cohesive and as together as long as we were, with Chancellor Weber and Otto and you and I and Deans Hinton and Flynn and the others. And so that really made it a pleasure to be an administrator at this university. Within the college, certainly Bill Muse was my mentor, you know, as an administrator. But I would never have been successful without the support of. When I came, we had a foundation of senior faculty members in the college who really provided excellent leadership. And within the college, my best friend was Arlene Wilson, who took me under his wing, and anytime I needed some sage advice, or I could go in and close my door and he could he'd help me out. You may remember in 1974 he was president of the Faculty Senate.
Yeah, that's right.
And I don't know if he served 1 year or 2 years, but I think that had just written a new charter for the Faculty Senate about then, and the nature of the Senate was changing a lot.
It went from a university Senate really to a Faculty Senate. Yeah.
And he was kind of one of the leaders in that evolution, but he really was a big help to me. And those other senior faculty members were people like Bill Hockett, he was the father of our accounting department, just a fantastic person. Willis Rokes, probably our leading scholar in the 70s in business. George Harris, Jack Hill, and continued today, Frank Forbes. Frank Forbes was our ombudsman back then, and he knew the ins and outs of the university like nobody I had ever seen. So these people were a great help to me.
Well, time's gone by very fast, and we're almost through. I can give you about 20 seconds to, if you'd like to tell us what your plans are for the future. You're about ready to retire now. Where are you going?
I took partial retirement this year. I went to half-time, but I plan to continue to do that for 6 or 7 more years. And essentially that involves teaching full-time in the fall semester.
So you will be continuing to be around?
I'm too young to retire.
Oh, good.
I'm only 56.
I'm glad to hear that. Well, I guess we have to wrap this up. I really do appreciate your coming in, especially with the jet lag that I know you must be suffering.
It's my pleasure. Thank you.
And I thank our audience today for joining us in a visit with Dr. Larry Trussell, who is former dean of the UN Omaha College of Business Administration, a longtime professor. And we've been taking a look at some of the history of UN Omaha as seen through the eyes of the history makers. So this is Jack Newton inviting you to join us again in the series we call Reflections in Time.
Reflections in Time is made possible in part by support from the UNO Alumni Association, fostering a legacy of alumni giving since 1913.